Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second half of the show. In the first half, Larisha Harris was speaking with co-founder of Liberia Economic Development Initiative, Joan Dougherty, about Ledi Liberia, which is a U.S.-based nonprofit working to reduce poverty and change lives in Liberia as it rebuilds from a 15-year civil war. Well, in the second half, today in the studio, we're still talking about legacy in rebuilding, but we're talking about it from an African-American history perspective. In 2019, we are currently celebrating the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first Africans in the English colonies. And today in the studio with me, I have Dr. Joseph Green. He is one of the commissioners for the federal program, 400 Years of African American History. Dr. Green, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Amanda. It's a pleasure being here. I thank you for the invitation and the opportunity.
Now, I see here you got a lot of titles. So instead of me messing it all up, I'm going to have you introduce yourself to our audience.
My name is, as you stated, Dr. Joseph Green. I'm the head pastor of Antioch Assembly in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm the founder of the 2019 movement. And also, I am the chairman of the 400-Year African American History Commission. As you stated, it was a federal law, H.R. 1242, passed through both branches of Congress. It was signed into law in January of 2018 by President Trump. So it's a federal commission under the Department of the Interior. And as you know, the Department of the Interior is the branch of our government that is in charge of the parks, the native lands, and all the cultural things that go on in the country, like First Nations, African American, et cetera, et cetera.
So tell us exactly what the commission is doing. I see here it's 400 years of African American history, and it's the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first African in the English colonies. So are they looking to preserve African American histories here in the United States?
Yes, it's about commemorating the 400 years. Now, a lot of people say historically that 1619 wasn't the first arrival of people from Africa. We're talking in regards to the British colonies, which now is the United States of America. August the 25th, 1619 was the first slaves, 20 and odd Negroes, as it says on the letter from John Rolfe. And so we understand that within the 400-year time frame that we've been here, that there is some good and there's some bad, but we really want to commemorate the contributions that we have given to this nation. And we believe that this is a time of healing and reconciliation, and that's done in having open and honest conversations. We're also identifying grassroots organizations all over the country to build a network of people that are honoring the contributions and talking about some of the historical events or occurrences of African Americans here in this country.
That's pretty remarkable. I'm kind of proud. You know, it makes me proud to see that our federal government is actively trying to preserve our culture and our heritage and our history. Now, when we talk about the commission's purpose, it says here that it's to plan, develop, and carry out programs and activities throughout the United States that, number one, recognize and highlight the resilience and cultural contributions of Africans and African Americans over 400 years. What are some of the programs that they're doing now or putting in place to help recognize African Americans and Africans?
One of our signature events is the Day of Drumming, which will take place on Juneteenth or June 19th, as many people may be familiar with. And of course, Juneteenth is something that we have been observing for about 150 years in the country in different places. Juneteenth, in a nutshell, is the time when after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, there were many slaves who hadn't got the memo, for lack of a better term. And so once they found that they had actually been freed, there was a great celebration. So Juneteenth is a historic day. We're having the National and International Day of Drumming, where we're coordinating around the country, various people that will celebrate through the drumming. And historically, the drumming has been something in our African culture that we have had that brings forth healing, communication, and it's called Let's Talk. So we're communicating, we're talking about healing and restoration. And my vision, Amanda, is for all of these things, and you know, from California and Allenswood, if you're familiar with that story, we know about Tulsa and Black Wall Street and those type of things that have happened. But we're coordinating with organizations all over the country to really talk about the fullness of our experience in the last 400 years. So the Juneteenth celebration, June 19th, also August the 25th in Fort Monroe, Virginia, which is under the National Park Service. Port of Comfort is the landing point. The slave ship, the Dutch man of war known as the White Lion, arrived there August the 25th, 1619, which started the what we call now the transatlantic slave trade as it pertains to the British colonies, which is now the United States.
This is a huge commission. This is something that's major. I want to kind of fall back a little bit. Now, you mentioned that you are on the board here, and I see there's a list of other prominent people throughout our nation that's a part of this as well. Are they all African Americans, or is it a mixed board?
No, everyone on the commission is African American. And as you see on the list, there's some very notable people like Dr. Lonnie Bunch, who is the director of the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. that's under the Smithsonian, Dr. Rex Ellis, who is the executive director. And the whole list is a list of prestigious people that have been doing these things for years. We've been celebrating the contributions of African Americans already. So it was just a natural fit that we all come together to spearhead this. And you know, I call myself, Amanda, when we get in our meetings, I call myself Phil Jackson as the chairman. There's such an awesome amount of talent that God has put together here on this commission. And some of the people I'm meeting around the country, which are just phenomenal people that I've been meeting. And I think that this is going to be an amazing time as we move into the next 400-year period, because 2019 is not going to be the end of the story. It's just what we're going to use to propel us into the next millennium of experience here in this continent.
You also have down here, it says, acknowledge the impact that slavery and laws that reinforce racial discrimination had on the United States.
Yes.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Kind of expound more and tell our audience more about why it's so important to acknowledge that impact. I know why, but why is it important for America to acknowledge that?
Yes. So being a pastor and understanding spiritual matters, of course, this all ties in for me, which is why it was so important for me to be a part of this. When we understand the trauma of slavery and Jim Crow and the segregation and all these things that have happened, in order for us to properly reconcile, it has to be done with open and honest conversations. You know, and reconciliation isn't that one person just has to get their act together, but both parties of a reconciliation have a part to play in how we reconcile. And so America has to at least acknowledge the traumatic experience of slavery. And there's so many other things I could go into, you know, even during Jim Crow and segregatory laws in the North, they had what they call redlining in some of the urban areas that helped to perpetuate poverty or, you know, hinder people from building wealth because of, you know, redlining in the urban areas where they devalued property values in the black neighborhoods, you know, and many other things. And I don't, for lack of time, but these are things that we have to acknowledge. We have to look at. Not only does America have to recognize this and say that you guys are very resilient. You know, as African Americans, the resiliency is something we're celebrating, because even in the midst of those, we still continue to grow and we continue to move forward. For us to heal as people, we have to know our history and know what we've come through and understand our true identity. Because one of the things I say over and over again, Amanda, is that we weren't slaves. That's not our identity. We were people that were enslaved. Because if you're a slave and that's your identity, you're going to be a slave. But if you are a people that were enslaved, once you become free, now you can move towards healing, wholeness. You can move towards a place of really moving into God's given destiny for people. Because God has a great destiny for us, and it's a time for us to move into that place.
So no, you're not saying let's not forget what happened. You're just saying let's remember, heal, and move forward, because a lot of people can take that either way, Dr. Green.
Yeah, and we learn from it because, you know, slavery is, and even understanding the nuances of slavery. So it wasn't all white people weren't slave owners, all black people weren't slaves. There's a lot of nuances within that you know, context. But in order for us to move together and heal, there's a thing that, and I do a lot of teaching on this, trauma. Trauma brings on fear. Trauma is passed down. There's a thing called epigenetics that they've been studying, that information is passed down through your DNA. And so until you deal with that and bring yourself to a place of healing, you'll always be re-victimized and triggered by things from the past, even when you don't understand it. So a lot of the rage that we see in the black community, I believe personally, comes from us not dealing with the trauma of our past experiences. And so we have a lot of angry young people, and a lot of those angry people, if you went up to them and asked them about the history, they don't really understand the history of slavery. So it has to be a spiritual and emotional thing that many of them don't understand. So what we do with the Day of Drumming is about healing. When we talk about reconciliation, I do a thing called the prayer of forgiveness that we do as a people. And within that, the context constructs of that, we say we choose to forgive. We acknowledge slavery and Jim Crow and all the segregatory laws, but we're choosing to forgive. And what that does is it closes the spiritual portals of fear and hatred and anger, and it puts us in a place of healing so that we can move forward. Because forgiveness is not in the absence of trauma or oppression, but you're empowered when you look in the face of a trauma and oppression, and you choose to elevate yourself above that circumstance.
So now, Dr. Green, my question is, I have to ask, because a lot of people are hearing you and they're saying he's right, but then there are some that are saying, how can I literally be free? I've done this prayer of forgiveness. I'm free. I'm trying to move forward, but I seem to consistently be faced with current racism and discrimination and oppression every step that I take, even now here in 2019 under the Trump administration. It's kind of like it cancels out each other in some people's mind. How do you battle that? How does the commission deal with that type of opposition?
Well, and I'm again, I'm not ignorant of even some of the racism, the segregation, the biases and the prejudices that have happened. But what I've seen a lot of times, because we have undealt with trauma, those things have more power over us as a community. Now, we face, discrimination head on. Whenever I see that, I address it and I face it head on. But because of me going through the process and allowing myself to be healed, I don't allow it to, I don't embrace it. It doesn't get into my soul, so to speak, and so I can move in a place of wholeness, of healing. And also from a place of I can operate logically. I'm not based, when we're not healed of our trauma, we react emotionally. So even though, for instance, in Ferguson, we may have said that there was racism with the Mike Brown incidents, but what was our reaction? When our reaction is to tear up our neighborhoods or loot or whatever, it shows that we're not healed. But when we're healed and whole, when we acknowledge those type of racist occurrences, if we say that they're racism and just using it for the sake of the argument, not trying to relitigate that whole situation, but when we do it, then we can move logically and move in a place of real solutions that help us to move beyond that.
Well, that does make sense, and I think that's what we're needing more so now. I think we've talked about the subjects a lot. We've protested, and now it's time to come up with a soluble action plan that is actually going to work and really move us forward as a community. Now, I also see here that your commission provide grants to communities and nonprofit organizations to help them develop programs. So you're doing more than just talking about the history of African Americans. You're actually actively allowing nonprofits to apply for grants and to further programs. What type of programs do the grants help develop?
They help to develop grassroots programs that have, for instance, in Allenswood, California, they have a park there. Allenwood was established by a former slave who was a general, and it was a community there. And the community at some point, it rivaled like Los Angeles or San Francisco, very prosperous. But there was some issues there, of course, and because of some racism, that community went away. So what they're doing is they're honoring what happened there. They're developing the place to educate people, to move forward. Every year they have a observance there. And what that does is as we educate ourselves and understand our history, then we are able to rebuild our communities. We're able to, mentoring programs. There's some people, I had a mentoring program in our community that dealt with young men to help to reestablish certain values and education and all those other things. So those are the type of things we're looking for. People that are doing remembrance things, observances, programs, those type of things, but also people that are putting programs in place that help our community to move back into wholeness and completeness.
Well, if you're just joining us, we are here in the studio with me. I have Dr. Joseph Green. He is part of the commission, Federal Commission, 400 Years of African American History, that is administered by the National Park Service. And they're talking about how to help preserve African American history as we celebrate the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the first Africans in the English colonies. And this is huge. I know throughout the year, different organizations here in Atlanta are having small things, small ceremonies to commemorate the 400th anniversary. They call it 1619. Is that the same similar things? When people see 1619, is that the same thing that falls under the commission?
Yes. So 1619 is that year that we are targeting as the beginning of it. And so other organizations that, like you said, 1619 or Juneteenth, they would all fall under the umbrella of that.
Now, I know you've partnered here. I know that's part of what you do. You travel around to different states and you partner with nonprofit organizations. While you've been here and the ATL, who have you partnered with?
Well, there's an organization that I've recently come in contact with. It's the Juneteenth Atlanta organization, and they're having a series of events leading near the middle of June. And so they have a website. I think is it JuneteenthAtlanta.com? Mm-hmm. And when I talked to one of the members, a brother by the name of Henry
Caslin, I believe?
Caslin, mm-hmm. Yes. I just met him and had a chance to talk with him on the phone, and he asked me to remind people of Atlanta that they're looking for people that want to come alongside them to help to promote this and to make this a big deal. So if anyone is out there wants to get involved, these are some of the organizations that they can get involved with.
And this is the National Day of Drumming.
Well, that is our event, and we are connecting with them. So they, we're in the early stages, but they said that they wanted to be a part of that. So we're going to coordinate that around the country, the National Day of Drumming, which will take place on June the 19th. And some organizations, they do the ringing of the bells, and those are symbolic of healing. We understand that vibrations and sound have an effect on our human body, and some people have said that the drums have been used traditionally to heal, and also the ringing of the bells that kind of stirs up your spirit. And I guess in this year that we want to stir up the people in order for to come up with a solution on how we're going to move together and as a community.
Well, I know for drums in my family, they are from the Gullah Islands of Georgia, down in Sylvania, Georgia. And every year at our family reunion, we do the beating of the drums. They say that was a way that our ancestors communicated with each other and kind of spoke to each other in a rhythmic vibration, like you said. And I don't know necessarily it was for healing, maybe to help, communicate more so. But right. It is power in that rhythmic vibration that you talk about. Now, before we go, I see you have 3 books yourself. A lot of people think, okay, who is this guy? How did he get on the commission? But you are pretty well accomplished yourself. You're a pastor and co-founder of Antioch Assembly, founder and CEO of Josiah Generation Ministries. And you also are the founder of the 2019 movement in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So he's not a Georgia peach, y'all, but we will take him as family. Tell us a little bit about the 2019 movement. What is that?
Well, we started the 2019 movement in 2015. I started to do a teaching, and it was called the Ministry of Reconciliation. And I began to look at the purpose for the creation. The Creator created us to in His image and His likeness, and we're supposed to promote and protect the image of God in the earth. And then I started to look at how we have turned away from that. And so with that, I started to really study our community and some of the things that are affecting our community, which led me to the understanding of the 2019 movement. One of the things that you mentioned was racism, and we know that racism still affects people of color. And I always do a teaching on understanding the difference in racism, prejudice, and bias, because we blanketed everything in the racism, which everything isn't racism. Racism is institutional and it's systematic. And so you can overcome racism by systems and going against institutions, but prejudice and bias, you can't legislate that, for lack of a better terms. So when I start to look at our community and see how the issues that are plaguing us, the reason that racism and prejudice and bias has a larger impact on us than it should is because of the healing and wholeness, the breakdown of our families. Our families are one of the weakest based on other cultures. Other cultures like the Asian community, a European Jewish community that has strong family structures are very strong, even in the face of racism on their end. The Asians have experienced some as well. I'm not going to, try to weigh which one is greater, but they are right now that they have the highest net worth in this country. And when you look at, they have the strongest family structure, and culturally they understand what their culture is. We've lost our culture, which is why when the slave owners brought us over here, one of the first things they did was strip us of our culture and our language. So as we move back to that, we started that in 2015, 2016. We started to do teachings. I've connected with people all over the country. We've done seminars, and we have a manifesto that we've created. And then we do the prayer of forgiveness, because in order for you to start to move into an action plan, you have to do it from a place of wholeness and healing. So we did that. I've written actually 6 books altogether. You have 3 of those that I want to bless you with, and hopefully, well, I hope I'm blessing you with them. You might read them and say, what's this in this book? But so that's what I've been doing. I have the Josiah the Josiah Project, which was under Josiah Generation Ministries, was a mentoring program for young men, and it's based on the character in the Bible, Josiah, who was a young leader, but he helped to turn his community around. And so we're trying to develop young leaders that will be leaders in their communities. When we see groups of young people doing bad stuff, usually if one leader would have stood up in the midst of that crowd and say, no, we're not going to do that, it could have changed the whole dynamic of what happened. So that's what we're going to do. We're trying to reestablish males in our community because, and I honor women. I was on a television show last night, and it was for Women's Month and the contributions of women, and they were like, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, part of what we have to do is we have to acknowledge that the Black woman has been so strong to hold our community up. Some by the choices we made in the community, but a lot of that has to do with things that we didn't choose." And so as we reestablish our community, we have to reestablish that male-female dynamic and how we grow together as a community, because we got to get the men back in place in order to stand beside our strong women so we can walk into the future arm in arm, from strong families and strong communities.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And you're right, we do. And then this last one, of course, is the 2019 movement, Restoring the God-Ordained Destiny of a Nation. If someone wanted to learn more about your books, learn more about the commission, and learn more about partnering maybe with your organization, your project organization, mentoring to kind of branch it out, how can they find out more? What websites can they visit? Well,
the main website is the 2019movement.org, the2019movement.org, and that tells you all about the 2019 movement. If you want to find out about the commission, you can go to the United States Department of the Interior, and there's a tab there that will take you to the 400-year commission. It'll also talk about the contact information, and it's important from that perspective to go through the liaison. And the reason I say that is because I'm traveling around the country. I'm meeting a lot of great people. But, my wife would tell you that I need to make sure I spend some time with my family. So the liaison helps us to kind of filter through the people that are coming in to connect us so that we can properly examine what they're doing and how we can partner with them. You can do that. You can go to my YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, the 2019 Movement, and I have a lot of teaching from a historical perspective. And what I do with my YouTube channel is I go in depth with a lot of these things from a historical perspective, because one of the things that I've seen, Amanda, is one of the reasons we haven't been able to overcome some of the things in our community is because we're fighting a modern day war, but we're fighting against ancient spiritual principalities that are centuries old. And it's not just from a spiritual or religious standpoint, but these are things that have been perpetrated on us by people that have studied cultures, and they understand how to oppress a culture or a people. And so until we understand the strategy of the enemy, we're going to continue to fall victim to those strategies. So I break it down from that perspective and how we can reestablish ourselves. I have a lot of documentation because all my references that I use, I tell people you can go find these out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't think I'm crazy by some of the stuff I'm saying. I've read it, I've seen it, and I have the documentation. But anyone who is interested in finding out about that, please reach out to me. I'd love to share all the stuff we have and to put them in a place of how do we build our community so we can go and be great again.